Ladies and gentlemen, it's a fabulous honour to be here, and thank you so much for having me. I wanted to just say two quick things, actually, before I share this presentation with you. The first thing is, it's not my presentation. I'm presenting it on behalf of a wonderful colleague of mine, Orlando, who couldn't be here. So I wanted to say that first. However, if you want to hear from Orlando himself, there is a rather good podcast called The Uncensored CMO that has got an interview with him. So do go and look that up afterwards if you'd like to. This is the book that Orlando wrote 2 years ago, and Orlando was concerned about society in general and about how, as a society, we are starting to turn in on ourselves. And he wanted to understand what impact that might have on the advertising that we are creating today. And our story starts with a guy called Ian McGilchrist. You may not have heard of Ian McGilchrist, but he is one of the foremost experts in the world on psychiatry and the lateralization of the brain and how the brain attends to the world around it. If you're planning on taking a rather long holiday, I recommend his book, The Master and His Emissary. It's amazing. Orlando was inspired by this book and wanted to find out to what extent does the theories that Ian talks about in the book apply to advertising today. Now, it won't have surprised any of you to know that we're going through a period of immense change. If you just think about technology, even think about AI. I mean, I didn't think about AI much before Christmas, and then suddenly, like, half my feed is AI. You know, we're going through a time of unprecedented change, and that change has to have an impact on us as people and as humans, and the way in which we interact with ourselves. But it's not the first time we as a society have been through periods of immense change. Think about the printing press. 500 or 600 years ago, suddenly the printing press made getting the spoken word into paper and out to people in a way that had never happened before. It completely transformed how news is delivered, how stories are told, and how society starts to create the narrative around it. Again, fast forward 300 years later, you have the Industrial Revolution, and that creates an immense period of acceleration of change. Technology enabled us to do things in a way that we'd never done before. Now, Orlando's got a special love of history and of art. And I wish he was here today, because he would tell you the stories in a way that I could never do, because he has such a love of art. But what he did is he traced the history of art through many periods, and he looked at how art has changed in response to society. He noticed something quite profound, that in periods of great technological change, what he noticed is the style of art changed. Rather than celebrating humanity, celebrating what he would call betweenness, how we interact with each other, characters, humour, scenes, and the like, he noticed art did something quite interesting. It became individual, and it became impersonal. And he noticed that actually in these periods of great industrial revolution, although technology was able to bring us together in a way that it hadn't done before, it also divided and separated. So what he noticed in the artwork of the period is what he would call the stare. And if you look at this, notice how cold and direct and unempathetic it is. It's like me looking at you. It's abstracted. And it kind of creates this kind of sense of loneliness. You can feel it, can't you, as you look at those two images. Can that be happening today? Well, it doesn't take long to go around an art show to see there are similar representations like that. Cold, hard stares. Could that be on our TV screens? Well, we see the same kind of thing, even in breaks between programming. Me looking at you. In fact, if we look at advertising as well, there's an advertising style which is quite popular at the moment, which is very much detached. It's individual and it's staring. It's separating the audience from the person. Think too about how technology has changed how we interact together. The photographer, Eric Pickersgill, took these series of, you might have seen these series of photographs. It's fascinating to see what he's done here. Because I don't know if you spotted it, but he's removed the phone from each of these scenes. It's interesting, isn't it? But it shows you something quite profound, that our devices, whilst connecting us with more people than we ever have done ever before, are making us miss the people around us, the people that are most important, the things that connect us together. It's almost like a religion. Because if you look at those people in those scenes, it's almost as if they're at prayer, worshipping the device and not seeing what is right next to them and missing the opportunity of that human connection. Well, does this have an impact on society and on our well-being? Well, it doesn't take long on Google Trends to have a look at how humour, for example, has been in decline for many years. I know it's well known in our industry. We've become very serious, haven't we? But look at the rise in anxiety and how many people are searching for an answer to the anxiety they feel. Has this impacted advertising? Well, Orlando's work suggests that yes, it has. The use of humour in advertising has declined. Now, I'm in a very fortunate position because I work for a company that measures how advertising works. It won't surprise you to know humour is one of the most effective forms of advertising because it has a habit of breaking barriers down, uniting us, and delivering a message in a way that's very memorable, but we're not using it in the way that we did. Can this be affecting us as an industry? Well, this was some recent data, which I think is quite shocking. We asked what percentage of the advertising and marketing industry is currently struggling to sleep because of the worry about their jobs. Just over 30%. How many people in our industry are feeling anxious or depressed? Also 30%. And let me pose you one very simple question. We all believe in the power of creativity, don't we? Do you think we can be creative if that's how we feel? I don't think so. And that means 3 in 10 people sat here right in this room that work in your teams are feeling this right now. It's not very conducive to making the kind of work that we as an industry want to make and be known for. So how do we answer this question? Well, this is where we bring in Ian McGilchrist. As I said before, Ian McGilchrist has done an astonishing amount of work understanding how the brain works. Now, a lot of people have said, sort of tried to debunk the myth of left and right brain. What Ian says is it's not that the left and right brain do different things, it's that they do things differently. And what he's done through some very clever means is isolated how the parts of our brain respond to the world around us. And if you want to look into it, it's truly fascinating. In fact, even to the extent that they've looked at patients and actually deactivated part of the brain and seen how they respond to like drawing paintings or responding to questions. It's really quite fascinating. But why is this important? Well, what do you see on the screen right now? I suspect that what you see on the screen is the letter H and the number 4. And that's because it's your right brain operating right now. And the right brain, as Ian describes it, is the part of the brain that's alert to the world around. It's vigilant. It's the one that dictates our attention. It's the awareness of people. It's the awareness of time. It's the awareness of place. It's where stories happen. It's where emotion is felt. And it's where memory is created. It's also what determines where we focus our attention on. Are we focusing our attention around us? As Orlando actually got this wonderful phrase. He calls this is our broad beam attention. It's where we understand the world. You may have noticed as well that actually the H4 was made up of a series of E's and 8s. And that's because you focused in on the image and you saw in detail. And that is the narrow beam attention of the left hemisphere. That's important because the left hemisphere is what enables us to complete tasks. It enables us to get detail, to focus in on doing things and making things happen. Now, of course, no one side of the brain is better than the other. It's about both parts of the brain working together in harmony. So again, why is this important for advertising? I'm going to show you 2 ads. One ad is rather old. I'll say that right now. It will take you to a time and place that only a few of us will remember. But it illustrates something of the right brain. And it will show you a style in which we've started to lose in society today. This is a Heineken ad from the early 80s. It's quite small, just to say, so you might need to use your left brain to focus in on it.
I walked about a bit on my own. Oh no. I strolled around without anyone else. Oh dear, oh dear. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills.
Only Heineken can do this because it refreshes the poets. Other beers cannot reach.
There you go. Now, what's wonderful about that is, apart from being quite old and nostalgic, is you notice how it opens on big vistas. You've got music. You start to feel emotional just listening to it, don't you? And then you've got a familiar voice telling you, poetry that some of us might have grown up reading. I don't know if it's still taught today. And then, of course, you've got a very clever idea that Heineken is known for and a lovely little bit of humour at the end there. And that's very much what the right brain does. In contrast, let me take you up to date with a rather more modern ad on the left-hand side to give you an illustration of what a left brain ad might look like.
Introducing Budweiser Zero. 0% alcohol, 0 grams of sugar, full Budweiser flavor. A refreshing alcohol-free brew that tastes like the real thing. Budweiser Zero, 0 compromise.
So you see what's going on there? We're really close up. And we're concerned about me showing you the product, right? In very granular detail. It assumes a huge level of interest in the product. The previous one assumes nothing. It assumes no prior knowledge of the product, but it draws you in. And that really is the difference between, I guess, what we might call brand building advertising and activation advertising. So again, let me just explain to you what Orlando's done, which is really quite magical, and I think very profound. Studying 15 years of advertising, in fact, he took an ad break in Coronation Street, because Coronation Street represents the kind of consistent life of our country. He took every ad in Coronation Street on a particular week, week 40, so he picked a fairly standard week. And he broke down the very features of every single ad in the ad break going back 15 years. And then he categorized them based on Ian McGilchrist's identification of what the left and right-hand brains do. And he broke them into these things. Now, again, I won't go into all of them in detail, because otherwise we'll be here till this afternoon. Well, we're already this afternoon, aren't we? Anyway, we'll be here till this evening. But the left-hand brain, as hopefully you saw in the advertising of Budweiser, is very flat. It's very abstracted. So you've got kind of body, you've got close-ups on parts. You often have words. You see ads, particularly online, where it's just words pumping, right? And there's a soundtrack thumping over the top kind of thing. There's a monologue. You're kind of being told what to think. And that kind of style is very reminiscent of the digital revolution that we've seen in the last 20 years, where everything has been cut up and fed across different platforms and atomized into smaller and smaller parts and fed to our social media feed. That's very much, and like you saw earlier, facial frontality, people talking straight at you. On the right-hand side, and this is the style of advertising which Orlando demonstrates has gone very much out of fashion, is the right brain. It gives you a clear sense of place. Imagine it's like watching a film or reading a novel. You know where you are. You're suddenly transported to somewhere else. There's a scene that unfolds. I mean, if you watch a great drama, you're captivated because you want to know what happens next. And there's a scene unfolding. You've got characters. You've got people that you relate to, characters with agency. There might be some implicit communication or some accents or dialogue which draw you in and quite unique. Play on words like we have with Heineken, sometimes set in the past and often referencing other works. And particularly important on the right-hand brain is music, and music that makes you feel something and emotional. Interestingly, down the bottom as well, the living. So like animals, things that are living. We're hardwired to connect with living things, and that's something that you see less and less. Now, I'm going to show you what I think is the most important slide in advertising today, but you won't be able to read it very well, so I'm going to do my best. So, here it is. This honestly is the money shot that you can't read, by the way. So I'm going to do my best to explain it. And when Orlando showed it to me, I'm like, dude, this is it, right? This explains everything. Anyway, what he did, right, you remember I said he took the left and right-hand brain, he broke advertising down into its very individual parts. But he then did two things with it. He then measured, and this is what we do at System 1, he measured the emotional response to that particular feature. So, if you see a dog in an ad, right, no surprise, does it create emotion? Yes, it does. The other thing he did is work with T-Vision in the US to actually measure the amount of attention that particular feature in the ad created in the audience. So it turns out that the things we feel emotional about are the things we also pay attention to, and funnily enough, are also the things we remember. Because our biggest challenge as advertisers is to be remembered in the first place, right? I mean, I know we think everyone watches all our ads, but it turns out they don't. So herein lies part of the answer. So what he was able to do is demonstrate that those right brain features that I showed you on the previous slide are associated with greater levels of emotion and greater levels of attention, and I haven't shown it here, but also greater levels of recall. To the extent that right brain style advertising can achieve 3 to 4 times the minutes of attention compared to a left brain advert, even in social media with 2.5 seconds. So it gives us a bit of a clue on the right-hand side there, which I know you can't read, by the way. We'll make it available. Listen to the podcast, download or get the book. Now, does this make a difference when it comes to business results? Well, I know I won't surprise you by saying, yes, it does. What Orlando did is work with Peter and Les and the IPA database, which is a wonderful database of award-winning work with loads of case studies going back over many, many years. And he isolated those campaigns that typically use the right brain features that I showed you versus left brain, and they substantially overperform in terms of business effects. But more than that, they also create a lot more fame. They also are talked about. They're the ones we remember, the ones we talk to our friends about as well. So again, herein lies a big clue as to what we can do. The other interesting thing as well is they also create more trust. Again, notice how in the Budweiser, you feel sold to, don't you? I mean, let's be honest, right? They are selling. On the Heineken ad, you just feel entertained. And naturally, you feel greater empathy towards the brand because of it. So again, right brain advertising delivers trust. To kind of borrow, this is a lovely quote, I think, from Orlando here, to say, the focused attention of the brain's left hemisphere perhaps ought not to be the focused attention of the marketer. I think that's a really profound kind of conclusion that he came to. So I asked Orlando in preparation for this, I said, give me 3 things to tell the audience, because everyone needs 3 things and a conclusion to kind of wrap it up to. And this is what he said. The first thing is he said, choose life. Choose the living. And again, in advertising, we've forgotten a lot of the living. And actually, the living is very important because it's what we connect with. So actually, putting a dog in an ad is a pretty good idea, or a meerkat. This is a gecko. Actually, I'll get my animals right. But it's surprisingly effective. And actually, a little fun stat from the System 1 database: the best insurance comparison site ad ever made has got a meerkat in it. The best mobile phone ad has got a dancing pony. It's true. It's funny, isn't it? These are things that we are hardwired to notice and feel emotion and remember. So, if you work in you might think you work in a boring category, but you can certainly liven it up with some living things. The second advice from Orlando was think like an animator. Animators work under a lot of constraints, but what they do with those constraints is they exaggerate character, they tell stories, they create plots. And one of Orlando's tips is he always asks the same question of an idea. Is there a character? Is there an incident? And is it in a place that I'm familiar with? And that almost as advice boils down a great plot that you might see in a movie or a book, and is a great test of an advert itself. And then suppose, going back actually to where we started, is the use of humour. And it's interesting what we're grappling with some very serious subjects, aren't we, as an industry, and very profound. And sometimes humour can be useful, not always, but what humour does, it breaks down barriers. There's a lovely phrase in his book, actually, where he says, what's too silly to be said can be sung. And it's a bit like that with humour as well, isn't it? That what's too serious to be discussed sometimes can be broken down with a little bit of humour. And it creates a connection, with the audience. So what I'd encourage us all to think about, as Orlando does in his book, is rather than continuing to look in and using technology to divide and reduce, maybe it's time for us all to look out. And that, I think, will help us not only make better advertising that delivers better results, but hopefully enable us to address the anxiety, depression, and sense of detachment that a lot of us, if we're honest, are feeling. And I know we're going to be discussing this afternoon. So thank you so much for your time. If you'd like to get a copy, please do. Thank you.